To discuss the topics of the week, joining me is Liberal MP Andrew Wallace and Labor MP Matt Thistlethwaite. Good to see you both. Thank you for joining me. Let's get straight into it. Stay-at-home orders will take place from midnight tonight in 4 local government areas in Greater Sydney. Matt, we'll start with you, given that you are in New South Wales. You've got your mask on there indoors as we speak. Was this the right decision, do you think?
Well, we've always said from the outset, Danica, that we should follow the advice of the medical experts if Australia's going to get through this. And I am in one of the LGAs here in Randwick. I'm in my office in Maroubra. We're just preparing with my staff to shut the office for the next week and make sure that we can still continue to contact constituents when they need to get in touch with us. But it is the right thing to do if it's based on the best medical advice. And that's what we've said all along, that as long as it's based on medical advice, the expert advice, then it is the right thing to do. And I know that there's a fair few people that are disappointed because we've got school holidays starting, but we've been through this before. If we all work together, we know we can get through this, and hopefully it'll only last a week. But I think that we all need to knuckle down and do the right thing and support each other, and my office will certainly be here to help people if they need that support.
And New South Wales has, in the past, handled its outbreaks very differently to other states, particularly not pulling the trigger straight away. Andrew Wallace, until today, she really resisted the calls to have these stay-at-home orders. If this strategy works, going slow, implementing restrictions before moving to implement a stay-at-home order, what message do you think that this sends to other states who do pull the trigger quickly?
Well, Danica, I think that what we've seen in New South Wales to date is the gold standard on how to deal with COVID. We've seen in places like Victoria and Queensland and other places like WA, which particularly in WA and Queensland, they've really jumped the gun very quickly. We've seen in New South Wales a very responsible way of dealing with it. I think I agree with Matt insofar as this advice is based on good, sound medical advice. The Chief Health Officer of New South Wales has served the people of New South Wales very, very well, as has the Premier, and she has set the gold standard for all of the rest of the Premiers to follow.
Were you at all surprised, Andrew, to learn that the limousine driver who transports aircrew, the source of this, wasn't vaccinated and didn't even have a mask on and wasn't required to under the New South Wales Public Health Act?
Yeah, look, Danica, I think that there are always going to be issues about whether it's some faults in the system, and at the end of the day, these are introduced and implemented and enforced by human beings. There are always going to be problems. There are always going to be mistakes, and it's up to all of us, 25 million Australians, to do the right thing by each other. And follow the rules. I think one of the biggest challenges we've had in this country, particularly in my home state in Queensland, is complacency. They look around and, you still see people arguing that really COVID's nothing to be worried about. You can't believe it. Do they not watch the news about what's happening in other countries around the world?
Well, it's a pretty big oversight, would you say, Matt, here, that we've got a limousine driver who wasn't vaccinated and not even wearing a mask at the very least.
It's completely unacceptable. This outbreak that we're having at the moment all stems from the fact that you have a frontline worker that wasn't wearing the right personal protective equipment, and unfortunately, bizarrely, wasn't required to, but also that frontline worker has not been vaccinated. And that's the great disappointment about the Morrison government's approach to COVID.
Yeah, but hang on,
that
Matt.
We're falling so far behind on vaccinations.
Matt,
Morrison said that Australia was at the front of the queue when it came to vaccination. Well, if that's the case, why are we last in the OECD in terms of the numbers of our population?
Matt, do you know the personal circumstances of this driver?
Only 4% of Australians are fully vaccinated. Yet in the United States and the UK, they're close to 50%. In Israel, they're up at 60%.
Matt, you don't know the personal circumstances of that driver. That driver could have some sort of an underlying medical health condition which prevents him from having a vaccine. So, before you go jumping on the high horse and attacking the bloke, unless you know the personal circumstances of that driver, I don't. but maybe he does have some sort of an underlying health condition. I don't know, but I don't think you can go and attack the bloke.
Andrew, we all know that the latest outbreaks, the outbreaks that have been occurring in recent times, have come from international arrivals, predominantly people who've arrived from overseas, and in many cases aircrew, because they don't immediately have to go into quarantine. Now, if it is the case that someone is working on the front line and can't be vaccinated, then I would argue that they should be put in a different role where they're not on the front line and in contact with people who are coming into the country and potentially going to affect them and others.
Well, if you're going to adopt that approach, Matt, then chances are there's going to be a lot of nurses and doctors around our hospitals that would be precluded from serving the people of Australia.
All right. I want to move on from it. There is an investigation currently surrounding that limousine driver, but as we said, we don't know the personal circumstances, but no doubt a lot of people's plans, though, have been thrown into disarray, so many people wanting answers about this. Let's move on now. The Prime Minister has proposed an army barracks in Brisbane for a quarantine hub, also extended the offer to Western Australia. Andrew, when do you think these could be up and running?
Well, I just want to clarify that one point where you've said an army barracks. My understanding is that it's storage facilities, so that differs from places like Richmond that are an existing RAF base. So the ADF facility near Brisbane Airport at Pinkenbar is a storage facility rather than an operational military base. So there's a
all right. When do you think though it might be ready?
Well, look, there's some discussion around the facility in Victoria, hopefully being open by Christmas. I know it's very early days. The Prime Minister only wrote to the Premier in Queensland last night and also to the WA Premier last night. But these things hopefully can be done very, very quickly, but I don't believe we've got a time frame exactly as to when it will become operational. But the point is that the one in Brisbane will be a 1,000-bed facility, similarly in Victoria, although it'll be initially 500 beds. But look, the PM has stepped up here. We are instigating these quarantine facilities. But I think it's very important to recognise that hotel quarantine has seen 370,000 people through those different places in this period, and it's had a 99.9% success rate. We're the envy of the world about how we've dealt with COVID, and Australians shouldn't forget just how well this government, the federal government and the states and territories have managed COVID to date. All
right, Matt, I'll throw this over to you. This is something that Labor has been calling for some time. Is this now a step in the right direction?
Well, look, we welcome the development, Danica, but I think that there's been a general reluctance and a delay from the Prime Minister on this that is unexplainable. Jane Halton did the review of hotel quarantine and released her report back in October last year. It was taken 8 months for the Prime Minister to respond. Hopefully it's not too little too late.
That's not right, Matt. That's not right. Jane Halton recommended a facility. We've got that at Howard Springs.
And running. The other point that I'd make, it's wonderful to see that this is happening in Queensland. There's an offer being made to WA. But the fact is the busiest airport in the country is in my electorate. It's in Sydney. And one would think that given most international arrivals are coming through Sydney, that you would have to look to put a facility such as this in New South Wales somewhere.